Hey everybody, my name is Michael Knipp, and I feel like I should probably start this video off addressing the elephant in the room. Does my face look swollen and or red? If you see something wrong with my arms, I just want you to know I got into a battle with a poison ivy or some other poison type plant, and I lost. If you wonder why it's been a while since I recorded a video, a lot of the reason is because my vanity did not allow me to want to record a video when this half of my face was so swollen at one point my eye was barely open. Poison ivy is no joke. Nevertheless, that's not what I want to talk about here today. I want to talk about the Stormlight Archive. Specifically, the major religion in the Stormlight Archive, that is Vorinism. Now, maybe I'm drawing conclusions and patterns where there were none intended, but after I read this massive church history, I think it was called Church History in a Plain Language, something like that, I'll show a picture of it, last year, I felt like I got a good survey overview for some basic church history. This is not anything major. I have some serious church history friends, and they're probably going to just crap all over anything that I say here, but this is some basic understanding that I have, and I thought that it was interesting that I personally believe Brandon Sanderson specifically chose to use a lot of parallels between the history of the Catholic Church and Vorinism in the Stormlight Archive. I think there's a lot of very similar comparisons, and coming up, I'll put a pin in this, but I think there's a very specific instance where, to me, it just seems like a blatant he's trying to parallel something. But I'll let you decide that for yourselves. I'll talk about that in a little bit. First of all, I'm going to give some basic very basic church history. That way this might make some sense. If that's not of interest to you, I'm sorry, it is of interest to me, and I hope it's of interest to at least some of you. So in its most basic form, the Christian faith in the New Testament spawns from the teachings of Jesus when he was here on earth, and then he had his apostles that he taught directly, and when he died, those apostles became the primary leaders in the church. They were the people that were speaking directly for God, and the writings of those apostles are what make up the New Testament. Those books, those letters that those apostles wrote are the primary fundamental core of Christian doctrine. They include the Gospels, which is the teachings of Jesus when he was on earth, and they also include the letters that the apostles sent to other churches because they were not able to be everywhere at once. Because this all happened at a time when there was not easy ways to spread information, they would write these letters and they would try to copy them and circulate them, but there wasn't a very established way to present a canonized single book that people would use as their source for theological information. So a lot of this was passed down from teachers who would teach other people, who would teach other people. One of the major significant things in the Catholic Church was having a sort of lineage back to the original apostles who have their lineage in their teaching back to Jesus. So there was a very important element in the early Catholic Church that the direct teachings of Jesus went to the apostles. Those apostles trained people directly. Those people trained people directly, and that direct lineage back to the original teaching was very important in the early church for how doctrine and theological debates and questions were sort of solved and reasoned out among the early church. Throughout history, there would be councils where issues would come up and the church would have to dispute and figure out how to solve them, theological, philosophical, cultural, etc. And they would have church councils, and then these people would come together, and basically the people who had that direct lineage back to the original sources as much as possible held more authority. The ultimate goal of the church was to maintain the sort of divinical mandate and rulings for the people that served God. It took a significant amount of time to actually fully canonize the Bible as we have it today. But even after it was canonized, there was a lot of debates and different ways to interpret the Bible itself, and then you had church councils try to figure that out. And basically, the church as a organization once that was allowed, basically determined doctrine, and that became the standard for everyone. In a situation where there's not a lot of people that are educated, there are not a lot of people that could even read the canonized scripture in their own language, there's a lot of pros to that, which is the people that are able to study this and have that direct teaching lineage back to the original source, they're able to present that information in the most reasoned and accurate way according to these traditions. And that's kind of the potential problem, right? If you're just having people pass things down through traditions, you're having a lot of people involved. And whether you're religious or not, people being involved in things always tends towards negative things. Bad things happen. People screw things up. That's kind of a universal truth. You take good things, you add people, the things become bad over time. That's the way of life. In the early section of the early church, the Christians were persecuted. Their religion was sometimes deemed to be against the governmental law, so they would use Christians as the scapegoats for any other thing that came up. It was kind of like a witch hunt. Basically, if something bad happened, you blame the Christians, you burn some of them, you say they were claiming to overthrow the government. It was just a thing that happened. Christians were the expendable resource. Until Constantine. Constantine came along, supposedly had a conversion, and then made Christianity, because of his personal decision, made Christianity the official government religion. I am sure that everyone who is interested in this video and has made it to this point knows the term separation of church and state. I know at least in the United States of America, there is the idea that the church and the state should be separate. People should be free to choose the religion that they personally adhere to. And one of the rights that people are supposed to have in the United States of America is freedom of religion, free to practice the religions that they feel convicted to do so with. I ended that with a preposition. Screw it. When Constantine made Christianity the official governmental religion for Rome, that was just a very different type of scene, because then Christianity became like government enforced, and it really got sketchy when the religious leaders and the political leaders the lines became extremely blurred. It doesn't take a big imagination to imagine the types of scandals and just sketchy things that can happen when you have your religious leaders enforcing a religion on people, and decisions get made politically that have to do for religious reasons, and religious decisions get made for political reasons. Like, these two things mixing, it's not ideal, and there's a reason why countries don't want that. On one hand, Christians were free to practice the religion that they believed in. On the other hand, they were mandated to practice it in a certain way, and people who did not believe in that religion were also forced to practice it. It's a very, very different way of thinking about religion, because the way we think about it today is it is extremely personal and unique to individuals or small groups of people that believe the same way. When you have a state religion, it's not like that. Everyone technically is under that religion, even if they don't really personally care. It's very blanket, and it's very impersonal, and it's very political. And then if the church is supposed to be bringing forth the teachings of God with any sort of consistency, but then they are suddenly making decisions based on political reasons because they are suddenly intermingled with politics, it's a broken system. It's a very bad system. It was extra bad when the church decided that it was their job to punish people for not following the religion correctly, and if there was religions that sprang up that differed from the state religion, they killed them. That was the only way to enforce the canon and the doctrine that they had established. You could enforce it with force, and then everyone would believe the same thing because you would kill any dissenters, right? Additionally, things changed. Over time, doctrines kind of got changed or added, or had the ability to be changed or added. And I'm not going to say that every single person in the religious hierarchy, from the apostles to the descendants of the Catholic Church, really had the best ideas for the church in mind. It's a broad subject. It's really sketchy and bad. And we'll just say that at times it was super corrupt, very, very, very corrupt. Now, in our world, you had an event called the Reformation, which was this cataclysmic event for the Catholic Church that created the religious type systems that we know today, where everyone was able to obtain a Bible and everyone was able to study the Bible as their primary source for believing what they wanted to, instead of the Catholic Church, which brought a whole host of things, including people being able to interpret things however they wanted to instead of no formalized, agreed upon interpretation. And at that point in history, I'm very, very much oversimplifying it, but at that point in history, everything had the potential to become completely individualized, and the unity that was in the church would never, to this day, never be able to exist again. The church is unable to maintain its doctrinal authority without forcing people to believe something through literal force. And when everyone is able to interpret the holy text however they want to, obviously, I'm oversimplifying. I'm a religious person. I'm not trying to give too negative a spin on it, but let's just face it. That's why we have a billion denominations today, because people interpret things differently. They fragment into different groups. We could talk about that all day long, but I want to draw now the comparisons to what I think we see in the Stormlight Archive. We know from the Prelude, shout out to that Prelude video that I made. We know from the Prelude that these 10 people that were coming back on this cycle on something related to the Desolations and the Oath Pact, we know that those people were revered as deities from the people that were around. They were called the Heralds. We know that the Heralds had people below them that were called the Radiants. I think for our example, we can think about the Heralds as being deities, or the Radiants as being like the Apostles. Now, Brandon Sanderson takes a weird step here where there's an event, you don't know much about it, but there's an event called the Recreants where something goes bad, and the Radiants kind of ditch mankind. And because Vorinism, the church, had to do with those doctrines, that affected the church history extremely badly. And they spent a lot of time basically rewriting history to make things seem different than it actually was, because they're trying to cover up the fact that the Radiants abandoned mankind. They have to maintain that the Heralds, who they were somewhat deities to them, they have to maintain that the Heralds were good, but the people that the Heralds taught were the Apostles, and they have to shun that section of their own belief system and try to pick up the pieces. And we've only seen it touched on extremely briefly in the segments that we've read so far, but it will be alluded to multiple other times. Have you ever read the word in Stormlight called the Hierocracy? The Hierocracy has a very, very similar trajectory to the ancient Catholic Church, because what the Hierocracy did was they wanted to establish their religion going back to their deities and then push it throughout mankind. And so they took over the government and they became the government. And if you read through The Way of Kings, you will recognize that this was an extremely bad thing for society, for the same reasons that I think it parallels exactly what happened in our world when the Catholic Church ran the world. And then they have a similar event where there is a person called the Sunmaker who unites 𝗹𝗲𝘃𝗃𝗃 under a single banner, and he sort of destroys the hierocracy, Vorinism, as it was. And very similar to the Catholic Church after the Reformation, Vorinism is completely undercut in significant ways. And I feel like as you continue reading this book, you're going to see additional elements of this, but you've already got a taste, which is the Vorian Church at the point that we are reading The Way of Kings it's all over the place. Look at all of the different characters as you read this book who believe in the Vorian faith, and look how individualized their own beliefs are and how much they affect or don't affect what they're actually doing in their lives or what they believe. Most of the characters have completely separate belief systems inside the Vorian Church. Not just, I'm discarding the people that aren't even Vorian in the story. We find out in chapter 18 that the entirety of the Vorian religion is entirely self-focused, to the point where like the Vorian Church has been relegated to slavery. While they still have their own organization, they are just slaves for rich people, and they kind of just help them assuage their guilt. Like they pick a calling as an individual, and then the church tries to make them feel better about that. And then their whole theology about what's going to happen when they die comes into it. But the reality is, after the Sunmaker came and destroyed the hierocracy, however you say it, it was very similar to our recreation, where everything was completely splintered. Groups were segmented by geological location. Individuals believed whatever they kind of wanted to believe. There wasn't really a standard for anything. They were trying to go through histories that had clearly been doctored and try to find the real truth of what happened, but even they were unable to. To me, that just feels extremely intentionally parallel to religion in our world. And I think it has to do with that relationship between religion and government and what happens when those lines get too crossed, and how does the religion maintain any semblance of consistency or historical significance while changing with the times, and then how does the government allow that to exist if people are truly living for this religion? How do those intertwine? I think Brandon just really paralleled what we see. Now, I gave you a little bit of a teaser earlier in this video. I want to give you a little bit of a warning. We are reading The Way of Kings right now, but soon we will be getting to Words of Radiance. There is a specific interlude, and I want you guys to be looking out for it, because to me, it felt just like extremely 100% an homage to a specific historical event. I want you guys to be thinking about the things that I've said related to the Catholic Church, the Vorian Church. Maybe there's something I missed, let me know. But man, if you've read Words of Radiance and you know what I'm talking about, comment down below. I feel like there is just an event that is 100% supposed to be parallel to something that happened in the Catholic Church. I've already hinted at what it was. But to those people who want to like read through and understand these comparisons as they're reading through the books, I think that's super interesting. I think it's valid because I think it was intended. Even if it wasn't intended, I guess it's really interesting to think about. But then especially when we get to Words of Radiance, be looking out for something, because to me it felt like, oh, yep, that's what we're doing here. I hope this video made sense. I didn't write notes, so it feels a little bit all over the place. Additionally, I have been pausing to scratch extremely hard because I'm so itchy right now, guys. I hope this was interesting to you. I hope that you are having an enjoyable week, and I hope to see you again next time. If you are not subscribed and you want to see more videos from me, you can subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, please. I hope to see you guys again soon. Bye.
No one ever get enough. Always looking out tired, sleep. No one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. Always looking out tired, sleep. No one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired.